Did you know you're not just limited to Floyd Rose, Schaller, Goto for your double locking floating tremolos? Don't worry, because I got you covered. Because in this video, we're gonna go over the 4 most underrated tremolos on the market today. Now make sure you stick around to the end of the video so you don't miss arguably the most forward-thinking piece of guitar equipment that's out there today. All right, this is the axe. Let's go. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Axe Guitar channel, your one-stop shop for tremolo tips and tricks. Yes, we've all heard of Floyd Rose, the OG floating trem specialist that really kicked off a movement of other manufacturers kind of using the same idea and producing their own floating trems. Today, the heavy hitters of the double locking floating trems are probably Floyd Rose, Schaller, and Goto, just to name a few. But did you know there's several makes and models that rival or are even better than the more well-known brands? Yeah, and these other brands probably come with designs and features that might fit your guitar setup even better. And guess what? They're not just cheap licensed Floyd Rose versions, they're just severely underrated and could arguably be the best trems out there on the market. All right, without wasting any more time, let's get into the first trem, and that is the Ibanez Edge Tremolo. I know, you're probably saying to yourself, the Ibanez trem is a heavy hitter, it's well known. While this might be true for you, it is a lesser known trem compared to other German and Japanese models. And for those of you that really love the Ibanez Edge, wouldn't you argue that it's underrated? So the Ibanez Edge came to prominence when it was released with the JEM and RG550 model in 1987. And since then, it's basically been the same recipe and the same design ever since that release. There's a reason Joe Satriani and Steve Vai still play an Ibanez Edge. Just saying. Now, interesting fact, the Ibanez Edge is almost completely manufactured by Goto for Ibanez. Knowing that Goto makes one of the best trems in the GE 1996T, with the Edge, it's good to know that you're getting a very well-made product. Now the Edge is a slight improvement over the original fulcrum Floyd Rose design, in which it's a little bit more ergonomic. The fine tuning screws of the Edge are oriented a little bit more towards the rear, or at least pointing towards the rear of the guitar, which gives your picking hand a little bit more room and you won't really run into them. It also comes standard with a pop-in tremolo arm that its friction and how it hangs is dependent upon plastic bushings, which are replaceable. And then if you turn over the guitar and look at the rear cavity, you can see that the Ibanez Edge has a spring retaining bar on there. This is a nice touch because when you're changing something out on your trem or just providing maintenance, sometimes those trem springs do come out, and so that retaining bar is nice. Furthermore, the variations of the Ibanez Edge, such as the Low Pro, the Edge Zero, Edge Zero 2, or even the ZR, are phenomenally underrated trems in and of themselves. If you can get your hands on one of these, you'll find out why they're a fan favorite, and the smooth operation is really unrivaled of any trem. I've seen these trems sold secondhand on Reverb, and I've also seen them on IbanezRules.com, where they have some rare ones, so go check that out. All right, this brings us to number 2 of our underrated tremolos, and this one's an American-made one that's actually been used in the past by Snake Sabo, Nuno Betancourt, and even Warren DeMartini. You probably already know what I'm talking about, and that is the FU-Tone FU2 Build Your Own Bridge. Like I said before, American-made trem that has a hardened steel base plate that offers a wide variety of metals, colors, finishes that you can customize on the FU-Tone website. If you take a look here, you can see you can get so many different colors that can match the overall theme of your guitar, or even your brand spanking new pink underwear. Now these bridges really are fully customizable, in which you get to pick your type of metal, the color of your hardware, the size of your trem block, and even the push-in or screw-on tremolo arm. All you do is go to the FU-Tone website, use a bunch of drop-down menus, and pick what you want and order your trem. Be advised, the more modifications and add-ons you add to the trem, of course it's gonna cost more. I mean, freedom isn't free, right? Also, Adam from FU-Tone warns that the base plate of the FU2 is a little bit bigger than the standard base plate of a Floyd Rose, so there may be a small amount of additional routing required, so just look into that. I personally love these trems because you're not getting a mass-produced piece of crap, and probably a trem that went through great QC. And look at this, you can even get titanium spring claw and saddle screws. You can even get a D-tuna put on this thing, come on. Considering what you can really get on the FU2 trem, it could be the best value, but is criminally underrated. That's an understatement. Okay, this brings us to number 3 of our underrated tremolos, and this is the Kahler, or Kahler, however you pronounce it, 2300 series tremolo. Ah yes, Kahler. The trem we've all probably seen but didn't want to get close to because it looked weird. But I like to compare the Kahler to Indian food, you know. Might be a little gross or intimidating at first glance, but when you try it, you're hooked. So the Kahler 2300 series is an American trim that's been used for years by artists like Kerry King and KK Downing. It really has been present for a while. Some say this is the best trim ever made, and it's just been plagued by bad marketing throughout all of these years. I mean, I think we can all attest that when we do start finding out about floating trims and double locking trims, the Floyd Rose fulcrum design is what we generally hear about first as young guitarists. Now the Kahler system is really interesting because it doesn't have to be fed through the guitar like with a tremolo block and then have the massive springs and the spring claw. It doesn't use any of that. Instead of a whole front cavity that has a little hole that connects to the rear cavity, it just needs a cavity dug into the body of the guitar to accommodate the main mechanism of the tremolo. The Kahler uses a cam system in which smaller springs are attached to itself, the actual assembly, and that's what gives it its resistance and its tension on the tremolo arm. The tension of the cam system can actually be adjusted with this middle screw on the cam. I'll show you right here. And you adjust the tension with that screw, which makes it a little bit easier than adjusting the tension with a fulcrum style bridge like the Floyd Rose. A few obvious benefits of the Kahler 2300 series is that 1, you don't have to mess with a rear cavity and keep flipping your guitar around. 2, the cam can be replaced if it's damaged, meaning you don't have to get a whole new trim. And then 3, the saddles can be adjusted and they can be moved to accommodate different string spacing. Lastly, the Kahler is kind of nice because it can be used on both left and right-handed guitars, because you can see it's got a hole for a tremolo arm on both sides of the assembly. Yes, I know many of us are so used to the fulcrum style tremolo system, but you got to check out a Kahler or at least play with it. I think you'll like it. All right, we have arrived. Number 4 of the most underrated double locking floating trim systems on the market today. You may or may not have heard of this trim, but I'd argue that this is one of the most forward-thinking pieces of guitar hardware out there. The floating trim I'm talking about is the Sophia 292. So you all have been badgering me about going over this specific trim, so here we are. So this trim might be the most interesting one on the list, and to be honest, at first glance, it looks like it belongs on a headless guitar. Spoiler alert, it can go on a standard guitar and a headless guitar. Wild, right? But the design of the Sophia 292 is awesome, as you can see with these barrel or tubular kind of saddles. So to string up this trim, you put the strings through the back of the trim through those tubes and lock them in place that way. You don't have to trim off the ball end and kind of bend it and stick it into the saddle and screw it down like you do on a fulcrum style Floyd Rose bridge. Furthermore, you see these knobs that are on the back of the bridge attached to the end of the saddles? These are the infinite fine tuning knobs that allow you to tune really in any direction forever, I guess. And you're really not limited to the height of your fine tuning peg like you see on the other bridges. Now there's a couple different versions of the 292, but the Pro version has some features that really distinguish itself from all the other trims on the market. For starters, if you flip the guitar over to the rear cavity, you can see that it has a thumb wheel for tuning adjustments and spring adjustments for when your guitar goes into different conditions like heat and humidity. That allows you to do that on the fly. Another impressive feature is that the trim has 2 stabilizing pins that come off the trem block onto the body of the guitar, and these really act as kind of like shocks on a car. This provides some soft stability and allows the trim to really get into the same position after you dive bomb, squeal, or even flutter. Considering the features and all the adjustments you can do to make this trim, perfect for you, the Sophia 292 is easily the most underrated trim of this whole list. All right, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. Let us know in the comments what you thought and about any other underrated trims out there. And as always, guys, if you like the content, consider subscribing below so you don't miss any videos like this one. Later.